Michael DiLeonardo, also known as Mikey Scars. The government says he's a high-ranking member of the Gambino Crime Family.
Would you say there's honor, loyalty, respect, or this brotherhood, or do you think it's from what you've seen, is it so contradictory from how it's built up in the press and the media and the films and the books and all that kind of stuff?
I think it depends on the time. In the old days, when this thing started, there was all of that respect and all that. I think it's kind of watered down a lot now. There is still the pecking order, the boss is the boss and all of that, but there's a lot of side deals that go on, which if it was sticking to what the real mob ethos are, then it would never occur. An example would be is you can't deal in dope. Okay, if you deal in dope in the mob, you're basically killed. Yet you had guys like Arnold Jerry, Anthony McGalley. You could go on with the list of guys who were promoted to acting bosses and underbosses, and they were involved in heroin trafficking. And guys were making money. Look at John Gotti's crew. Look at Quack Quack. Look at all these guys. Those are all no. So they're people. That whole thing is more relaxed, and it's not like in the old day when wise guys are all dressed to the nines. Michael kind of brought that out. Michael always got dressed up. He looked the part. He behaved the part. You knew but then again, that was his exposure to his family, his father, and his association with Carlo Gambino. Other guys don't have that. They don't know. I've seen guys come in looking like a bunch of bumps. They're talking to Greg or things they want to do, not respectful in a way. And, it has changed dramatically the way it used to be to what it is now. And it's also become, back then, it was a life choice. You became a made guy because you believed in that. But you believe now, it's more like a business opportunity. So it's all about making money. And what happens is, like, you own a business, you're going down, you're not selling any more product. What do? You fold. Well, the same thing with that. So that era of old gangsters are pretty much, there are a couple of old timers still there doing it, but, not the way it used to be.
You know what I think what changed? You know what I think what changed? Not to interrupt you. I think, like you said, it was a lot different back then. And they were just regular guys to a certain extent. Like me and my father have this conversation a lot. Back then, you were a made guy, but you were a butcher. You were a barber. You were somebody in the community, but you were this made guy, and that was the networking of it. And you helped each other. It became something else in America where that was, made guys didn't work anymore. And it just became something else. And I think that's what RJ was getting at.
Yeah. You mentioned Arnold and Anthony McGalley. I know they were in your 32 people that you helped them bring down and stuff. What did you think about them? What kind of guys were they?
Arnold was very cautious guy. I mean, Greg DePalma used to go crazy with Arnold, right? Because Arnold will call him like around 10 o'clock at night and say, Greg, we got a meeting tomorrow. I got to see you. So he says, my guy's going to pick you up at 8 o'clock. So picks up Greg. Greg goes, he drives from Westchester. Next thing you know, he's in Manhattan at a parking garage. Then they're in another car. They go to the Upper East Side. They switch cars. They jump into another car. They cross the bridge. They go. He said by the time he met this guy, he said it was noon and he was ready to go to nap. He was very, very cautious, guy about meeting people anybody knew. He did not want to meet. He knew about me. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. Greg DePalma, when we started off at first, we would tell him that we had hot televisions, plasma TVs. And the New York Times wrote an article about this. I don't know how they got the info, but Greg says, why don't we give Arnold a plasma TV? And I, of course, said to myself, we? You mean me? Because you ain't getting we. You're going to get the credit, but it's me. You know. So anyway, we go to Best Buy and buy a plasma TV, right? We load it up. We drop it off at Filippelli's place because Filippelli was very close to, he was a relative, actually, of Arnold. And we watch it go and goes into the house. Now, what happens that weekend, that Sunday? The Sopranos is on. Now, the episode of Robert Loggia being this old crusty mob guy who is released, and he's having a difficult time accepting the new mob. And he doesn't like the way it's heading. So he becomes troubling for Tony Sopranos and the rest. So in order to get rid of him, they say, we just stole some TVs. Let's set something up where we go to Robert Loggia's house. His name was Feach Lamanna in that story, and tell him to safeguard the TVs. Feach goes, yeah, I'll do it. I'll get to keep a TV and a couple of thousand for the deal. He puts it away. Then what do? They drop the dime. The next scene you see is the parole officer knocking on the door of Feach Lamanna and says, hey, I want to search your house and I want to look at that shed. He goes, it's not there. We'll look at the shed. Then after that, you see Loggia being violated and going to prison. So Arnold Gutierrez is sitting in his underwear, eating popcorn, watching this episode. He calls Greg DePalma, right? I get a call like at 4 o'clock in the morning. He says, Jackie boy, I need to see you right now. I said, what's the matter? I got to see you now. Come. I go over there, right? Greg DePalma goes, where did you get that fucking TV? I said, what do you think I got? I think I went to Best Buy, which I did, but, you know, I said, what are you talking about? He says, oh, no. So where did you get that? He goes, oh, yeah, I knew. I said, I told you, my Dominican guys from the Heights, they made a score. See, you don't know the problem I had to do. We had to go in there with Robert and his house and pull the damn TV off the wall because he saw this goddamn Soprano movie and show, and he thinks the freaking TV was hot, which it is hot, but he was afraid of getting parole. So I could just conjure the image of Arnold Gutierrez sitting there 1 minute watching plasma TV, the next minute he's got a black and white with fucking rabbit ears. You know? I'm thinking to myself, but that is a true story. Arnold was very coy. He had a street boss, and that was not only Anthony McGalley, who was his underboss, but his nephew, Louis Filippelli, who, by the way, prior to my case, we never even heard of Louis Filippelli. No one knew. In fact, there were several guys that we never even heard that we were able to identify. Louis Filippelli was one of who now I hear is a captain, I think in Harlem. But he comes from, you know, that pedigree stock that is his uncle. It was Arnold Gutierrez. So Arnold was the kind of guy coy. Anthony McGalley, he was kind of run around guy. He used to hit Greg a lot. And Greg used to get pissed off because I dropped off TV for him too. And Greg said he was driving him crazy because McGalley's son played baseball, and Greg and McGalley wanted Greg to touch base with Willie Mays to get him a tryout. Willie goes, I never seen this kid play baseball. How the hell am I going to call Willie and tell him to freaking put this guy on the team? You know, but that was the way the mob operates. It's always favors and this and that. But both of these guys, Arnold was very coy. McGalley was a little laid back because he was a street boss. So, you know.
How about Pete?
Who is that?
Pete Gotti?
Pete Gotti, no. I never met him. Pete Gotti, I think, was in jail
Was he in jail? Okay.
at the time, and Pete Gotti. No, we haven't. I didn't hear. I do know that
JoJo.
Jojo Carrazzo. Yes, we met. I met his son and him. The other thing that was interesting about Jojo Carrazzo was that his son. I don't know. I kind of got I got these weird vibes. Like every meeting, like Michael said, occurred at JoJo's. Well, it was the Nicky La Sorsa, and then there was a big war that Greg had with Little Nicky. What was his name? That Greg used to call him the dwarf. Who was he, Michael?
Mickey Carrazzo?
Nicky Carrazzo. Yeah, Greg called him the dwarf. Hey, Greg hated this guy with a passion.
Really?
So I don't know if you ever met him. Like any reason why he would hate him?
Oh, I know Nicky very well, but I didn't know why he hated him. This was probably way after me for sure. Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear? I guess. See, Michael was off the streets in 2002, and you're, in their years after.
2002.
Yeah, a few years after and things like that. But did you ever hear any discussions about Michael? People bringing up Michael? Anything of because he was in his cooperation at that point and stuff like that. Did you ever hear anything?
Yeah, I did, RJ. Greg spoke highly of Michael. He said he couldn't believe it. That was one. He called up John Gotti's mother or wife on the phone in front of me, and he had heard that John Jr. was coming out of jail. Now, I wanted John Jr. to come out of jail because maybe Craig, would have made some introduction for us. But they went with the Sliwa case. Remember the Sliwa case? That case was right after he got hit with that case. So he never really got out of jail.
Right.
So we never really saw them. But we do know that with Michael was the guy who his reputation was like he was a serious guy. No one really knew the story, what caused it. It was just, if anything, no one believed it would cause him to cooperate. But it was like they knew that he was a serious guy, like a nice, he wasn't your flaky type of guy out there. But, Greg said he was a very sharp guy, and it surprised him.
What was the family that you went undercover in? Was it a chaotic family? Was it an orderly family? Was it a strict family? What was it?
I think it was the family, like one of the first things we did, we were able to identify the administration. Because when I got in, no one really knew it. They knew Peter Gotti went to jail. They didn't know who was running the ship at all. And it seemed that Magali and Scutieri and Carrazzo put the ship back in motion. They started being more careful, less cowboyish. That's the kind of impression that I got with Greg. But I was like so low in that totem pole that I knew there was an issue with Nicky Carrazzo trying to take over the family. I don't know, but Scutieri wound up running it, and supposedly he was he stopped his celebrity gangster shit and did not want to have John Gotti up in the spotlight. He was more laid back, quiet. Nobody knew who's running everything was hushed. In fact, prior to me coming on board and finding out what the administration was, nobody knew what the administration was within the Bureau. So it was this void because they had kept their mouth shut. It wasn't like what John Gotti did after he waxed Paulie Castellano. He shows up and everybody kisses the ring. Well, it didn't happen that way with Arnold. So they was kind of now regrouping, and they seem to want to go back to a certain, way of doing, which was making money. One of the things that I found out when Greg and I started talking about, being proposed, he said that what they're looking for now, and he said the word now, is earners. I says, we're not looking for killers. We're not looking for, she called them shooters. We're not looking for shooters. We want guys who are going to come in and make money, who are going to be good earners, going to keep their mouth shut. They're going to be capable guys if need be. They're going to be guys that are going to be loyal to the family and to Cosa Nostra. Now, what he did ask me was, when was the last time you ever been busted for dealing dope? And I said, no. He said, well, if you've been busted, tell me, because it's got to be over 5 years. If you were dealt 4 months ago or a month ago, you're not going to get straightened out. You got to have that 5-year statute of limitation running out. So you can't have any cases pending or anything at all done to get straightened out. And he goes, and what happens is you could be called upon to do a hit. Not that you have to whack anybody, but you could be called upon to like that. But you also distress, if you're an earner, they're not going to get you involved in any hit because, you're making money for the family. So one of the things that they stressed on is that you could be a guy driving, and all this stuff was state. You could be driving a getaway car, a crash car. You could be digging a hole, whatever the case may be, that you could be called upon. But if you're a guy who's out there making money and hustling, they would never ask that of you because they don't want to lose the cash cow. That's the way it's done. So it kind of morphed, the Cosa Nostra morphed, where they went from that celebrity gangster to now becoming a little more serious and maybe a little less profile. I mean, Michael, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, your ears were to the.
Yeah, well, I had heard that in the street when Pete had that last commission meeting about that 5 years. So you're right. You're right on there. What he told you was the truth. And it wasn't just applicable to guys who were dealing drugs. It was the guys that were using drugs. And that was my commentary to him was, you got to be kidding me. Who's the probation officer amongst the school when the guys stop using drugs and wins the 5 years up? It's really ridiculous about that, especially the using drugs part. Because if you're going to vouch the guy, what's the difference if he's using or not using? It's up to you to be responsible for him. What's his 5-year probationary period? But you're right on point with that. And it's very interesting because I don't think I really heard how Greg spoke to you about trying to get you prepared to get made. And I think the people really want to hear that. I think that's, if you could dive deep into that, how far he went to school you is really interesting.
Yeah, another interesting thing he mentioned was what he booked, because I was playing dumb, because again, I grew up around Cubans and the object is to get them to talk. He says, listen, what's going to happen is, because your name is going to be circulated around to all the families. They want to know who Jack Falcone is. Is he a pedophile? Is he a guy who's with another crew? Is he a guy who got chased by some other crew? We want to make sure that you're getting a pass that you're okay. Then, when everything is okay, you're going to be filling in for somebody who died. And that's Christmas. Sometimes we open it up a little more, but usually if the guy died in 1985 and his name is Vinny Pots and Pans, then you're going to be placed right next door as the guy taking Vinny Pots and Pans' place. So that's the list that gets circulated around. If it comes back empty, they'll say, okay, get dressed. Now, the key thing is, and he always said this 100 times, he would say, put on your best suit, and when they ask you, do you know why you're here? The answer is you have no clue. Then he goes, yeah, but my son, what a card. He was asked that question, and he said, because I'm getting straightened out. And he said, that's stupid, Now, Michael, he got straightened out with you?
No, it was later on.
Oh, okay, that's what he said. And Craig goes, oh, he always laughed at it. And you say, I got straight going. And then after that, you go through the ceremony, talking about the ceremony. There's a knife and there's a gun. Pick up the gun, the trigger finger gets cut with the knife. You bleed into a saint. And you burn in hell if you betray, like the saint, if you betray the Nostra. And then after that, you lock in with everyone, and you go out and you celebrate. You go out and how you're told as to who's your boss, who's the captain, who would you report, and then after that you get straightened out, and then he would say about Robert Vaccaro. He says, Rob Vaccaro, hey, come up with a job, so I've got to come up with things for him. So sometimes we got to give him a bookmaking numbers to run, or put some money on the street and let him oversee it, because it's all about making money. And then of course he also discussed. He goes, thing I don't understand. He goes, and look at those freaking bananas, the bananas he was talking about. They stripped the guy. He goes, why would you want to straighten a guy out if you're going to strip him and look under his ball sack? Why in heaven's name would you do that? He goes, I didn't understand that. He goes, forget about it. Don't even put him in. And then the other thing is, we got a lot of, he called them garbage cans. And you know how he talked about garbage cans. These bastards, they don't know shit. They put them in their names. What have they done? So I think that's one of the reasons that Greg started to put me and some other guys he wanted in, because he figured he'd give us a little control. And he kept saying it was garbage that was being put in, that he was not happy with it, So, but that was Greg. The dope situation was kind of interesting to me with the 5 years, because that was a important thing. Now we were ready in the FBI. We were ready, like, oh, this is great. You got to figure out a way to record this. You got to figure out how we're going to do this. And then all of a sudden, I'm with Greg DePalma and Robert Vaccaro, and he goes, Robert Vaccaro walks in and he said, you hear what's going on? And he goes, no. It goes, somebody big just flipped in prison. Got some information. It's hot off the presses. I don't know. So he goes, what do you mean? So then the next time we met, he goes, that was Joe Messina. He flipped. And they put everything on ice. And then, of course, I had my big falling out with the Bureau, because I thought they were very short-sighted in not pursuing this case to its maximum, because in every drug case I ever worked, I always go up the ladder until you can't go anymore. And here we are in a situation where my identity is not being questioned. I have won the respect and support and the love from a captain in Greg DePalma, and he's telling us all these great things, and we have an opportunity that maybe we could get straightened out, and we could bring in other guys in to other parts of the country. Like, for instance, hey, Greg, I got a deal, a buddy of mine in Philadelphia. He's doing this. Oh, I'll hook you up with somebody. Got a guy in Kansas City. Got a guy. All of that stuff went down because they decided to terminate the investigation, which it was, in my opinion, very short-sighted. I write about it in my book. Very do not understand it to this day, and it is what it is, And I went on to work other cases, but this was one of these cases that we were there and we could have probably gone all the way, and but that's a pipe dream now.
Do you ever, everyone knows the mob guys, they break balls all day long. And, sometimes they will say little things and mess with you. Like, there's guys that have nicknames like Black Dom because he looks black. And Michael told me stories about guys, that they make fun of your ethnicity and where you're from. As far back, Vito and Lucky were known for picking on Costello, breaking his balls about, you're Irish or this or that. Did anybody ever make a joke to you about, oh, you're Cuban, you're probably Cuban, or you're this, or you're never? Did it ever happen?
No, everybody thought I was Italian. Now, one single person ever questioned that. Now, one of the things is Michael will also tell you, in the mob, there's a lot of nicknames. There's always Fat Mike, Fat Tony. You never call them fat to their face. It's always behind their back. Unless, of course, the guy gives it okay for you to call me derogatory, like Jimmy the Weasel or something. Like, who was the guy who hated the nicknames? So, Michael, there was a couple of guys that hated their nicknames, and you never would dare even look at that Lucky, not Bugsy Siegel. He said Bugsy at all to him, he'd go ape shit on me.
Yeah.
So as far as busting balls, everybody busts balls, about it. Like mine was like, they would love the way to be honest with you, they loved the way I ate. We would go out to dinner and we'd be just chowing down. Hey, pass me this, pass me that. And they, oh my God, look at this guy eating. And it was like nobody said, hey, I'm worried about you, although even at one time they found that, we signed up for the union and then we had to use our cards and they found that I had atrial fibrillation. So that was the scary part there because I had to walk a delicate line with my family and I had to walk a delicate line with the Bureau of yanking it. So I kind of kept it hush because I wanted to continue with the investigation. But as far as insults and all of that, they really, they know not the buttons to push for people. I never met somebody, unless of course it's one-on-one and the captain will call somebody a fucking asshole or whatever. But I think that's done more, not like they do in the Sopranos, because that's disrespectful. And part of being a gangster is to have respect and not to be treated like you're some piece of garbage. I mean, Michael, am I right or wrong in this?
No, it's funny you said that because you talked about somewhere I read about was it Nick Parisi? Is that the guy who was giving you some coaching?
Nat Parisi.
Nat Parisi. Yeah. And he talked to you about compliments, like mob guys love compliments or something. And
that you do. I mean, like, but I do that in my normal life. Like, I saw Michael, we have dinner once. He shows up in this Temptation jacket, beautiful blue jacket that you have. I go, hey, man, you're looking pretty dapper. You're looking good. I'm not going to make fun of him. I mean, so it's always you pay a compliment to people like, hey, man, you're looking sharp today. Look at you, man. Where'd you get that suit, man? I like that. The more compliments, but that's human nature, though, RJ, It's like anything else. If you're nice to people, they tend to be nice to you. And that's how I did my Undercover. I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be accepted because the last thing you want is having somebody question you, and then you're out of luck. So compliments always pay. Even you find an ugly girl, you tell her, hey, you look beautiful today. She said, I love you. She'll say, oh, what a nice girl. Well, you're not going to say, hey, what a fucking brute this girl is. Come on. So everything I did, I would always try to pay compliments. If the compliments weren't warranted, I kept my mouth shut, But usually, you would say, hey, man, you're pretty good. How do you get all this shit, man? You always wanted to do that because people, that's human nature. If you're complimented, you're going to like somebody back. And which is what an undercover does. It's like psychological warfare. You're out there trying to fool people and you want them to like you so you could do whatever you need to do. You don't want to antagonize anybody or have that person treat you. I don't recall anybody ever being pissed off at me in any kind of way, and if it was, I would tend to avoid them in my own way, but never would I be disrespectful and say, oh, this fucking guy is a jerk off. I may say that to Greg, but I wouldn't say that to anybody else, because I had.
Were you always wired?
You what?
Were you always wearing a wire, or were there days that you weren't?
RJ, the reason you have to wear a wire is because it's indefensible. You wearing a wire, it's no longer my word against yours. It's your words. You're telling me what you did, telling me what you're about to do. So you have that on you. It really, because the object of any case is not to go to trial. It's to take a plea, because trials are expensive. So you want to do is how a person takes a plea is the overwhelming evidence that person says shit, or the lawyer says, you stay on course, you're going to get banged with 20 years. But if you take a plea for 10, because they got you by the balls, they got you. They got you because there are tapes of your boys doing this. There's evidence of you doing this, photographic evidence. There is Alsher, there's electronic surveillance over you. You have no other choice to do. Now, you can take a chance. And that was the John Gotti method. John Gotti always felt supposedly like, hey, I'm going to just go to war and I'm going to be going to trial, and whatever happens, it happens. And that's why mob guys sometimes, they always go to trial because they don't want to do the allocution. They don't want to stand there at the end and say, I plead guilty because I was a member of the Gambino Crime Family, because it's a secret criminal society and no one is to know that. So if you allocate to the fact that you are a member, you're violating and exposing the mob. So what did the Genovese do? And that's what the Genovese is, what they are so good at it. They said, fuck that. Who invented that idea? We're going to get this guy pleading out, get him back on the street and making money for us. Who cares about allocution? And the Genovese started that. But Gambino's, right? Am I wrong, Michael, or not?
Yeah, and it was John was wrong about that. He even had his best friends. I went to trial because of his edict on that. I wasn't going to disappoint this guy while he was dying and in prison. There's no way. So I went to trial based on his edict and protocol. But you're right. That was something that I went over with Junior about multiple times, about let guys take pleas and come home. We need guys back in the street. I had no problem with guys taking pleas at all. If it was good enough for them, if guys wanted to go to trial, that's another story. That's on them. But if a guy could go to a plea without admitting that there's a Gambino family, where the language was at times I committed this crime with others, not with the organization. So the banana guys way back, they stipulated that they weren't going to straighten out new members. That John flipped out. John was in the street at that time. That's an issue. Of course, now you're divulging there is a membership and you're the person or be one of the people involved in being inducted or doing the induction. So that was pretty bad language. But the government seems to let everybody plead out with others unless something changed from then. You know, just to go back, digress on something. Greg DePalma giving you the do's and don'ts and what's going to happen in that ceremony is, I'm not going to say stunning coming from him, but that's what happens. It's stunning because of the short period of time they know you and didn't vet you out the right way. And because, just to be frank, Jack, and we talked about this, I think, in the past, and you never could have talked to me. No, not only you, no new guy could have talked to me like that. I never would have took somebody else there. I don't care if you took me to the cemetery. You know what I mean? I had to know you from way back. That's what our neighborhoods were about. That's what family was about. That's what built and insulated this. The new guys that came along were the guys like Greg DePalma for greed. You were a guy with a tremendous personality. You had the wherewithal to try to make people earn, right? And for him to take that confidence, you really won him over, because even with his big mouth, he broke down something that he really, you know, I heard from other things that was all a lie. They were never going to straighten you out. No, I believe he was going to straighten you out. I really believe that. And what you're saying right now solidifies that, because he gave you the details. Lock it in and all that stuff. You could never know that unless he told you that. You know, there's testimony from other people, but you're not making this up. You lived this case. It's on tape, a lot of this stuff. So, you know, your work there as somebody. Well, let me just add on to that. First of all, your personality, I'll give you your personality, right? You're easy to get along with. You've been seasoned with criminals. You're not an FBI agent that came from Iowa. You didn't come from Indiana. You're a Bronx guy. You were born in Miami, but you're a Bronx guy. So you have the personality of street guys. And just my assessment is all the cases you did, these 100 cases and dealing with hundreds of guys, led you to believe more. Like I said, when I talk to you, when we're together, we go to dinner or lunch or whatever, you know, I feel like I'm talking to somebody that was my peer in the street, because that's what you had to do. You had to live that life as a street person. I'm not going to mention any FBI agent's names, but it's not talking to that rigid guy with structure and seriousness as an agent. You're a regular guy. So I could see how you got in there with your personality, you know? And it's not that you fooled anybody. They fooled themselves by not going back and saying, hey, how old were you, Jack, when this happened? How old before you got with the Gambino? What age were you?
I was in my 60s.
60s.
Yeah, I'm 73 now, so whatever.
Right? So think about that. Here's a guy that's, I go back to 50 years old. A guy that's in his 50s. Where you been? You know?
This is the thing that I have always said that I have noticed that before you got in because of lineage and people knowing you were known, your father was known, your cousins were known, your brothers were known, your grandfather was known. You were trusted through blood, through family, through kinship, through kin connections. That's how you got in. It didn't matter if you made $1 billion. You can be on record and be around us and hang out. You're never getting a button. You're never getting ever proposed if no one knew who you were or where your loins could be traced to. And that was one of the things that I think really changed that life so much. With, like you said, they said to you, it's about, we need earners. We don't need shooters no more. We want people that can make money. And when it becomes about making money and not preservation, which it used to be about preserving the life, preserving the meaning of it, the traditions, and what it represented to its people. It wasn't like we got to get more guys. People used to get, I remember when Joe Messino was caught on tape or something with Joe Messino when he said, you know, I want to start getting guys he wanted people to start making their kids. Get your kids made. And people were like, why would, that was the tradition of the mob. You got your kids made. You brought those people in. He wasn't crazy. That was the norm.
But not to interrupt, you have to be 100% correct with Joe Messina, because he straightened out Frankie Copa's kid without Frankie Copa's permission when Frankie was away. He straightened out Frankie Lino's kid, Richie Cranerella's kid. He was straightening out guys' sons. You're right. Now, let me add to it with Jack, right? Jack, I always thought, and I said, like, I could never trust you because 50, 60 years old, where'd you come from? You know, I had to know you to get that close. And even if somebody wanted to bring somebody that close to me, I was highly suspect of if they came from another neighborhood. Why they hang out those guys in another neighborhood? What are they doing here? That was just me. I was built that way. What I always I was conscious of was, you know, you guys profile before you have a target, right? Unless you just stumble on a guy with a crime, you got him dead bang. But if you're going to go after a guy, make him a target, and set up a sting of some type, you find out, and correct me if I'm wrong, what's their habits? What do they do? What's their weaknesses, which is most important, right? What's their telltale signs of how they're going to behave in this type of situation? For me, I always thought the Bureau would send a girl agent into me some way, somehow, because I was a player, right? Big time going way back. So with all of that, I always thought you guys would send an agent, a female, into me. And of course, that would be my weakness. So my antennas were more than guys was, who's this girl that just came from Philadelphia that wants to hang around us? And that's a true story. A girl did come from Philadelphia. She was a Bobby. And I never did it. We got friendly, but I never did anything with her. I always suspected her. You know, maybe she's a plant, you know?
Yeah, but that backfires too. I did a case where with the cocaine cowboy guys that they brought in the jury form and they brought in the girl and the guy was all over her. And she said, hey, listen, I can't continue this job because hey, we're looking at the reputation that I would develop and I just don't feel comfortable in that. So they had to get rid of her and then they brought me in to instead do that because it's, for a woman, it's sometimes pretty much difficult for them to go within this group because the guy's normal reaction will be to try to hit on her.
Right.
And if she's not good looking, then what's going to be the attraction? What has she got to offer?
Right.
You know, it's a very male-oriented world of organized crime. That I think it's a tough sell. But you know, regarding your question, both of you guys, I look at this life. It's all about timing. It was just the stars were aligned when I got in with Greg. When he got out of prison, he had that issue going, and he was maybe looking at me as a guy who is going to bring them to the mountaintop, to bring them back to the glory days. You know, virtue of my size, I'm 6'4", weighed like, that time like 490 pounds. You know, sometimes you say, this guy, I used to be able to handle myself. I was a bouncer for many years. So it's kind of like you feel, I don't know, he felt maybe empowered around me. And I had money. I drove a Hummer H2. He was in the car. We went out to dinner. I had money. I gave him stuff. It was like I was the goose that laid the golden egg.
Yeah.
So of course he became, but it was all about timing. Had it been like if Michael, you know, if I went to approach him, he was sitting at the top of the world. Why would he would have got no need for a guy like me? There's no need. But Greg came out of jail. He knew about the situation with his son. He knew people were talking behind about his son. So then, you know, maybe he wanted to surround himself with what he thought was, you know, a little power, a little strength, a little.
Well, it was your personality. From what I
Yeah.
it was your personality that led him to be enamored with your potential and what you could bring to the table, the way you conducted yourself. And that's what I had heard. But, you know, going back to how he meets you is because you helped in a beef or something like that. I don't think we talked about that.
No, how we met him was an introduction. We knew he wasn't really the target of our investigation. Originally, it was the Albanians. The Albanians were moving in on the strip club. And then what happened was we were going to go in. I was going to do Alex Rudash and them. And then one day, the Albanians came in and terrorized the whole place, broke glasses, beer bottles, smacked some customers around. And they said, we want protection money, you pay us, or we're going to keep coming back here, and we're just going to burn your place down. So what happens the next day? Lou Filippelli walks in. And Lou Filippelli comes in and goes, hey, I heard you had a problem. We can make your problem go away. Now you got to come with us. So you think about it, it's the old standard extortion. You create a situation and you offer a solution.
Right.
So that you know they're working together. Because the bottom line is, I'll make your problem go away, but you got to pay me $5,000, the same thing you got to pay the Albanian. So where is that happening? So anyway, we decided then, we go, shit, man, let's do that. So I paid off Filippelli, and Filippelli assured us on tape that, and his sidekick, I forgot his name, that the Albanians will never return. I kept saying, this money is to keep them out. We don't want them back here. And it says, but also we're not going to be able to pay you $5,000 a month because these guys came in, scared a lot of our good customers, started smacking some of the girls around, broke. So they said, don't worry about it. We're just in it with us. Boom. Sure enough, we are now with Louis Filippelli. Out of the blue, Greg DePalma comes out of jail. And he shows up. This thing shows you how much rehabilitation goes on in prison. He gets out of jail, he drives to the club, and he shakes it down. He says, hey, I'm back in prison. This is my place. I had it before. We changed the name. You're back with this.
Was it Pretty Woman?
Yeah, it was Pretty Woman at one time. Then it became Mirage.
Okay.
We said, that was actually, we told him, we go, look, it's under new management, and he goes, you know, I don't care. I'm going to need some money to get straightened out. We told him about Filippelli. He goes, I'll handle that. Next thing you know, surveillance sees Filippelli, sees Greg DePalma meeting with Filippelli and saying, hey, this is our club. Filippelli comes back and says to us, listen, this club here, he said, was great. Greg got his stripes back. You could either go with Greg or you could come with us. So we decided to hitch our wagon to Greg because telephone, telegraph, and tell Greg was a better angle. Yeah. So that's why we dismissed the Albanians, and then some other guys worked the Albanians, did a fantastic job and locked them all up. But we stuck with Greg. And then slowly we started working, getting to know him, getting involved with him. and feeling, keeping him at bay because we didn't want to push too hard because it would scare him. But at the same time, we wanted to wet his beak. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it answers the question because it changes my mind on how you got there now. Because I didn't know the deep particulars that what you said. They came to you. I get it. They threw the rock through the window, see who comes, and they fixed the window. I get it.
Exactly.
But they set themselves up because when they got there, you were already there on something else.
Yeah, we were there for the
You didn't have to bring yourself in. So I changed my opinion on this now.
Yeah.
You didn't have to. They went to you. That's how they got. That's how they got Let's say got fooled, because you didn't try to romance yourself. You didn't try to get there and make them like you. They came to you, and then
they felt
not saying X amount of money because you negotiated. That was another strategic point. It says, all right, here's 5,000. We can't pay that much. It shows that there's business going on and it's genuine. Little they know it was actually became a sting that they brought upon themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how we did it slowly. Greg started getting together for lunch. He knew he had the umbrella. He had the club. Now is back under, his control. He was on record with Greg. Now he won that over, and we slowly, methodically got to get into a situation with Greg, and we dealt with the cigarettes. Then we moved into the stolen watches. He loved that. At first, he took me to the jeweler, and he was having the jeweler open it up to see if there was a recording device in them, because there was a case that there was somehow a recording device. So he was very coy at the same time, but it took a while to get really him dependent on it. And what did it was getting back to the original question you guys had, was being around the dinner table. We would go out to dinner, go to these good restaurants. Greg loved to eat, and then he would always do this. Afterwards, he would say, I got to get my wife something to eat. He would order something to take out, and he'd go home and, go. Then he got to a situation that he needed a phone. We gave him the phone. It was all wired up. So, he was a guy that started feeling comfortable, and we were lucky that we hitched our wagon to him, and as opposed to the crazy Albanians.
Did he love the life, or did he love making money, or just was he because some guys just love being in the life. Like Jackie Knows was that way. He had no money, but he just loved the guys, loved being in the life, loved having restaurants and hanging out with John. Or was Greg just a guy that just loved the action of just making money and that's it? Because all the stuff you're saying, it doesn't really seem like, he doesn't even sound like a guy in the like a traditional Cosa Nostra guy.
Yeah, but it's funny how what you just said, because it's true. I mean, even I had difficult time sometimes even with drug traffickers. And Mike would tell you, Mike was from a different era. There are guys out there who are, who are gangsters, who are mobsters, but are lonely guys. They're guys who want to establish their little fiefdom of crime and to look important and to look. It's all about when a mobster goes out to eat, you take out that big wad, that knot of money. Like you want to pick up a check, it could be a broken down valise, but you still go out there and you want to show you got some money. So it's all about sending out those signals, because the more prestigious you look, people want to bring you deals when it comes. But Greg was the kind, if you ask regarding both, I think it's a little bit of both, RJ. He loved the life, and he loved making money because of the life. Because, I mean, I saw him make a lot of money, and he's always hustling people, shaking them down for money, and it was all about money. And one thing about Greg, unlike a lot of mob guys, and Michael will tell you, it was all about kicking up with him. Greg DePalma always told me that he would kick up more money than anybody else, because if he ever stepped on his crank, they're going to feel bad for him, and they're not going to take care of him or he'll be given a pass. And let's say, for instance, you got to give a guy 10% of a deal, or 20%, whatever it is. Right, DePalma, bang, 30%. Now, you're a boss, you're sitting pretty. You go, man, this guy, he's earning, he's giving money, he's taking care of me. So you're going to be reluctant about getting rid of Greg at 30, and you are Michael at 10. You see the way he was, and he really believed in that, and always picking up money above because he will be looked at more powerful, stronger, and respected because he was kicking up money. You know, right, Michael, am I right or wrong?
Well, yeah, the money don't talk, it screams, as we always say on this show. And in that life, you know, is it right? No, because you're really like buying your way through even making a mistake. He bought an insurance card in his mind by giving a little bit more than anybody else, which it does work. It's that's just human nature. You could forgive.
Look at the TVs was an example. He wanted me to give him a TV to a boss. No reason. He wants to show the boss, hey, I'm out here working. I'm out here making money.
Right.
I'm hustling. You got something new that comes down the pipe? Oh, Greg, I'm the man to do it.
You know, John Gotti had that quote on the Gotti tapes where he says, you know, a guy brings you a basket, it makes everybody else think he's a good guy. It makes him a motherfucker to me.
They're going to be, once your friends are going to be friends of ours, once the same friends will be friends of ours, it's going to be the way I say it's going to be in Cosa Nostra. You might, because the guy is nice to you, and I'm not talking about you, I'm just saying, you might think that was your best, it makes him a good guy. It makes him a motherfucker, it makes him a good guy. It makes him a good guy when he's one of us and he proves he's one of us.
You bring me a goodie bag, you ain't nothing unless you're one of us, he said. You bring me a basket, all you are is a motherfucker to me. He was saying you can't buy me. You can't bring me a bag of money and think that you're going to get that it's going to curry favor with me. You can bring me anything. I actually see you worse now for thinking I'm the kind of guy you can buy.
You know what, RJ? It brings me back to a story that we told. Did Greg ever talk about a guy named Tony Baker who used to be the captain?
So he mentioned him that he was first with him, right? He was under Tony Baker.
Correct.
In Harlem, right?
That's right. Harlem guy. Correct. Now, when Tony Baker dies, and I've told this story before, Tony Baker dies, John's the boss, and he has to fill that captain seat. So John said one day, you know, he had a choice, Louis Brage or Greg or anybody else in that regime he was going to give that spot to. He wasn't going to give it to an outside guy to put in that crew. So he said one day, there was a guy who wanted to give me $10,000. All of a sudden, he gave me an envelope for $10,000 because he thought he was going to get that captain seat. That's why he's not getting it, because he tried to give me that $10,000 now. Why didn't he give me the $10,000 before? So he gave that guy was Greg DePalma. He gave the job to Louis Brage, Lou Riccio, who deserved it. Good man, Louis.
That is so Greg, man. He was unbelievable. He was all the money wise. I mean, I saw this guy one time. We went to the city for summer, and we went into the Big and Tall shop. They have an expensive store there. I forgot the name of it. It's anyway, it's very expensive. So I'm with Greg, right? We're looking at clothes. He's looking. Next thing you know, he's grabbing ties, putting in his coat, socks, and his pin. I go, what the fuck are you doing? So he goes, what do you mean? I go, the camera's here. What are you doing, Greg? So he goes, oh, no, give it. I'll buy it for you. Don't worry about it. No, fuck that. I'm keeping it. And he walks out with all this stolen merchandise. So I said, Greg, we're in the car. He goes, let me ask you, not to be disrespectful, but why did you do that? Well, I would have bought it for you. He says, what's the matter? He goes, that's what we do, Jackie boy. This is the life we chosen. This is it. We steal. That's it. And it said everything to me, like it came close, like he's a gangster and he can't help himself. He had to steal because he just couldn't help himself. I mean, the guy was the most colorful guy I've ever met. And one thing about Greg, too, he feared no one. Early on, when we got him under the club, he went by himself to Cafe, what's that Albanian place in the Bronx in Morris Park? Cafe, well, wherever where that place where Alex Rudas and the Albanians went. He went there. Greg, you want us to go? I figured, good. They go, no, I got this. He went by himself. He also went by himself to talk to the Albanians over at Balvella's. He went supposedly by himself to Rayos to straighten those guys out. So Greg relied, he had a lot of balls. Now, I don't know, by himself would have been a little bit crazy, but Greg he was a ballsy guy for an old man, you know? So he, but you heard about that table in Rails, right? That it was John Gotti's table.
Yeah, well, each family has a table supposedly there.
Yeah, and then Greg wound up finding out the Albanians took it, and he went back, and then Greg profited by selling it to people. I can get you a table. You got to pay me $5,000. I'll get you. It's always a hustle with Greg, always.
Michael said, I had a 10-year run that everybody should feel. A lot of the ex guys in the life. I even heard Michael Franzese, he's a Christian guy. He travels the world talking about God and how evil the life is. And even he said, anybody that tells you they don't miss the life is lying to you. Was there, for you, being there even as an undercover, is there any allure to it where you are, man, this is fucking great. Like, did you have any enjoyment? Can you see the rush of the life? Can you